Welcome to the 22nd episode of Renegade Thinkers Live, a show that promises to be long on marketing insights and short on overhyped buzzwords. We'll be drinking in the latest tactics and the coolest gin. Yep, this may be the only live marketing show that also features a gin tasting. This show is being live streamed via our friends at Restream, and if you want to drink along at home, today we're having a taste-off between Kenobi Kyoto Dry Gin and Drumshanbo Gunpowder Gin, which we've had on the show before. I'm your host, Drew Neiser, live from my home studio in New York City. Thanks for joining us in my soon-to-be-released book, Renegade Marketing, 12 Steps to Building Unbeatable B2B Brands. Step number 9 is called Sell Through Service. Like it or not, we are in the give to get economy, which means every marketer needs to give away something in order to get the time and attention of the prospective customers or employees or prospects. You need to earn your way into their good graces. You need to help them through the buying process. Or as Brent Adamson would say, you need to make buying easier. One of the ways that B2B marketers try to do this is through content, lots and lots of content. So much content that most of us are buried in it, which begs the question, how do you do content right? How do you do intoxicating content? This is a show that includes a gin tasting after all. So how do you create content that cuts through? To answer these questions and more, we have 3 amazing CMOs backstage ready to share their insights. And with that, let's bring on Jamie Gier, CMO of Ceros. Jamie, hello there.
Hi, Drew. How are you? Greetings from Seattle.
Well, yes, and greetings from New York. Nice to see you. So, we'll have some fun later on with the gym, but let's dive in now and talk about how important is content in your overall marketing mix and what are sort of the key roles that it plays?
Yeah. Well, as a marketer, content is key. But as a company, it is what we do at the same time. So it's kind of the interesting dynamic of I use content like most marketers do to really bring out the best in our brands, but engage our buyers as well in very intentional, deliberate ways. But my company is also core to what we do is help our customers create really engaging content. So it's kind of this very cool dynamic that I have going on. Look, the reality is that most marketers rely on really good content to break through the noise and engage their buyers full funnel. And to get the best out of the channels that we stand up, you really have to have a good content strategy that involves a story that you can tell throughout those channels to really get the attention of your buyers and your customers, by the way, because we always have an opportunity to upsell and cross-sell and just expand how we service our customers. I listened to the last live event, Drew, and Shirley Macbeth from Forrester indicated that the number of touch points required in the buyer's journey has increased from, I think it was 17 back in 2019 to 27 this year.
I know, that was so scary.
It was so scary. And when I was really reflecting on that, I thought, why? Why? Yeah. Now, I understand it's very noisy out there and many of us require digital capabilities to reach our buyers. And in the time of COVID, I think they also indicated that the volume of messages have increased by 40%. So we're all going after the attention of our buyers. But I think that underscores the importance of how do we get back to fewer touch points with really engaging content that kind of breaks through. So I think now we're faced with this challenge of how do we do that? How do we get back to fewer touch points? Because how we're engaging with content gets the attention of the buyers and gets them involved in the experience that we're trying to create with them.
So lots going on in that, and I want to break it down in a couple of ways. One, you mentioned, since you guys are in this business, I bet the pressure is on you to do this better than the average bear. Because you really, because you're using your own tool. And I would think that, and I would say, I always thought in the early days of marketing automation that Eloqua, HubSpot, and Marketo all had the best content, all of them, and they were showcases for that. And I'm just imagining that there's a lot of pressure on you to up the bar. How do you sort of go about making sure that your content is better?
Well, first of all, our mission is to help our customers unlock creativity. We want to spread more creativity to the world and help marketers and designers be better at what they do. And so for us, yeah, the bar is raised really high because we are here to show them the possibilities of how far that they can take their content in ways that their buyers are going to engage in that and take some kind of call to action, whatever it might be. We happen to have just some phenomenal designers and content strategists on staff. And we're always pushing the boundaries of what can we do in our studio, which, by the way, is no code. So we've made it such that even marketers like myself, and I wouldn't say that I'm technically savvy, and I'm certainly not a designer, but I can actually get in there and create very interactive experiences because we don't rely on front-end web developers. But we're always pushing the bar in terms of showing the possibilities of what you can create, which is why we've even focused on having an editorial site and a gallery to inspire people, whether they use Ceros or not, but to inspire them to show the different types of content that you can create that's really going to appeal to your buyers, but also provides you a better way to tell your story. Anything from interactive web pages that people can explore to games and quizzes. But what I love about it and what I actually love about my job is that we get to push the boundaries and show the possibilities that are right there at the fingertips of different types of users.
Yeah, it all makes sense. There, again, a lot to unpack there. The one thing that you mentioned and that I really try to keep in mind when we create content is customer first. And that's what part of the way I think about it is this going to be a value to my most important customer? Will they get an insight or learn something or have a moment where they go, hadn't thought about it that way? And so, because if that's the bar, right, that this is an existing customer and I don't want to waste their time, then you start at a very high place. Whereas if you have this imagined person out there, you can say, that post is good enough. So yeah, I guess there's a question. What's that?
Yeah, good enough doesn't work anymore because, I mean, go back to the Forrester data, 27 touch points. You're going to lose attention. I mean, that lengthens the sales cycle. So how do we, getting to your point, be more relevant and more specific to these different buyers? They all have different personalities. That's why most marketers now are looking at it from the standpoint of personas and really figuring out, taking the time up front. Like, the content strategy needs to be infused with insights that you know about your buyers. What motivates them, what inspires them, what are they looking to do? How do you show them a better way of doing their jobs, of living their life, of contributing to society? And you have to do that work up front initially to really get into the minds of your buyers so that you can hook their hearts. And I think that the relevancy and level of getting to know these buyers and your customers, I should just clump them into one, is really important because guess what? They are flooded with information and they are tuning out. I mean, who does? I sit there and delete my emails that come in. I just can't. My mind
like
can't
whack-a-mole.
It is. It's like, okay, so how do you break through that? And it's going to be through relevancy and being allowed to be invited into the homes and the offices of the people that you're trying to engage with. How do you do that? And I think to a large extent, it's knowing them, and then it's creating this experience of inviting them in and showcasing what you have to offer in a very real, focused way.
Okay, that's awesome. We're going to now bring on Suzanne Reed, who is the CMO of LBMC. Welcome, Suzanne.
Hello.
How
nice
are
to
you?
See you? Good.
And where are you?
Where am I? I'm here in Nashville, Tennessee.
Awesome. See, we're just covering the globe here. We've
We
got,
are.
so we are. Okay. So there's a lot of content out there. And I'm curious how you are approaching content to make sure that yours is rising to the top.
Yeah, so we, a lot like Jamie was talking about, content marketing for us is real. It's a commitment. It's not a campaign. And it's a commitment to our clients and our prospects to help educate and bring them to where they can have that conversation or ask that next question. And so again, we talk a lot about the personas and knowing your target markets. And, at one point we flooded all of the channels with the same content, right? Now we're being much more surgical and much more targeted in our approach. The messaging, the medium, and the actual industry and personas that we're going after, and decision makers. And so less is more today, which is a little different than just a few years ago. And a big part of what we really, really focus on is, that client problem. What's the relevant client problem? What's a simple and easy way we can help them understand where we help and where we can come into that process? And what are the right mediums and channels for us to give them that information? And I'm a firm believer, a little bit like if you have teenage kids, you're never going to tell anybody something one time and they're going to get it. You're going to have to give it to them 2 or 3 times, maybe 5, depending on what kind of teenager you have. So, that's our mantra. Is our content strategies just continues to be very relevant and surgically targeted to our audience, so that we can create that conversation to help them down their path of their problems, their solutions that they're looking for.
Sure. I'm sort of have this vision of water on a rock when you're talking to your teenager, but just keep going. Yeah, that's just drip and that's steady. There's a certain commitment with content in the sense that you can't just do a one and done kind of a thing. The challenge I see though is you get these content calendars and you become slaves to these calendars. We got to get a thing out here and we got to get another thing out here. And so the machine takes over. And so I'm wondering again, because it's easy to say, all right, we have these 5 personas and we need to get this kind of information to them in this time, but it just becomes about getting it done. And so how do you make sure that it really is worth that prospect or customer's time? What are the sort of what are the bars that you set for this kind of stuff?
It's a great question. And where we are always looking is what's resonating. Where are we getting feedback? Where are we getting connections? Marketers a lot of our job is connecting the dots for individuals, right? And so
Sure.
The feedback that we get from our clients and or prospects, and that doesn't all just come through the traditional funnel. We're constantly asking questions. We're constantly asking collaborators that we work with. We're asking clients that we have. We're asking prospects. We're working with our sales teams. What's resonating? What are people gravitating to? What's bringing them in? And so I think constantly assessing that so that to your point, it's not a checkbox. We like to think of ourselves as serial marketers. And it's almost like that never ending, if you will, dramatic shows that just continue on. And they've always got an elegant ending with dramatic pause. We're going to always be doing that. Constantly,
Yeah.
You get the dramatic pause, think about it, and then come back out.
And is there, based on the way you've observing this, is there a particular type of content or a program that you've done of late that you think has really worked well for you?
What we see working well is when we are using short clips. I kind of call them chunking. And obviously visuals are huge. Visuals, videos, I think the last statistics, we saw 600% better viewership and engagement with video. And so we definitely use those, but they're not long form. They're more storytelling. They're almost like live case studies. And we've used those, and those have really worked well to really help clients and or prospects see themselves as the individual asking the question, and they can relate to the solutions and services that are being offered back.
You know, and it's funny, you've certainly been part of a Tuesday Tip. We've used Tuesday Tip for CMO Huddles, and they do get thousands of views, and it's kind of fun that you get this bite-sized information. But I'm always sort of, at the same time, we're recording a show that's going to be an hour, and we do get views because we go deep onto a topic. So I kind of feel like there is an overemphasis on snackable content, because if you're have a long sales cycle and a lot of people involved, snackable content isn't going to get the job done. And so I'm just sort of wondering how you think about the balance of this, because yes, you can get a lot of people to watch a short video, but does that move the needle? I mean, just someone watching the short video, or is it just that gets them on the progression?
I think it gets to your point. It's getting I think it's getting them on the progression. That progression is where we talk about it's a commitment. And because we're doing the chunks and we're trying to encourage them to come in, we're giving them each of those bite-sized pieces and bringing them down the path. And we call it road mapping. We do a lot of road mapping. Here's your type of client, here's your type of prospect. How can we do interactive? You're at this stage in your company, you're at this stage with your product. Where can we help you along that continuum? And to your point, we might not get them to read a white paper, but we might get them to look at 4 videos that together, those 4 videos create that story that gives them the picture of what they're looking for in the further information to go to the next evolution of reach out, contact us, wherever that next funnel step might be.
Yeah, I'm just going to sort of, I completely agree with everything that you said. I want to make one more sort of vote for long form. And before we get off of the snackable thing, we have a post on renegade.com that's 15,000 words. Like, you go, wait, what? It's like the mother of all posts on B2B branding. We get 400 people coming to the website every day to look at that thing. And so while that you can get a lot of snackables, there are times if you can go deep on a topic, this is me sort of from my experience. And so I think the key for those folks as we're talking about this is don't just think about it as one part of a program, right? We can't just live on snackable content, right? We need some big things too for certain times. Okay.
We call that evergreen.
Right.
We call those evergreen content pieces.
Yeah. And boy, you feel really good when you find one of those, right? That just like kills it on SEO and it just keeps the traffic going, and those Absolutely. You can build a lot around it. So do you think about evergreen as the center of a whole program?
In our world, the evergreen, given that we have so many distinct service lines and so many different buyers, we look at evergreen as kind of that brand authenticity that kind of shows our reputation and reinforces the trust and that advisory aspect that we are trying to constantly work with our brands and our prospects. So our evergreen content, we will have them for each of our service lines. But again, it kind of builds to that whole storyline of the reputation of our brand and our expertise.
Right. Okay. All right. Well, with that, thank you for that. Let's bring on Heidi. Heidi Bullock is the CMO of Tealium and the star of episode 235 of Renegade Thinkers Unite. Hi, Heidi.
Hi. Thanks for having me.
Hey, well, thank you for your patience as we worked our way through this. And where are you?
I'm based in Palo Alto, so representing for the Bay Area.
All right. We have now literally crossed the country here on Renegade Thinkers Live. So it's really nice to see you. And this far in the show, we've been talking a lot about sort of content as an acquisition model. And I was sort of surfing around your website and found this Tealium Learning Center. And content becomes a retention play in that sense. And can you talk a little bit about the that program and what you're doing there?
Absolutely. So This was said earlier, but for me, content is such a critical aspect across the entire buyer's journey, and it's a great way to engage folks. But I kind of equate it to marriage, and I feel like once people become customers, just like when you get married, that's when the work kicks in. And I think that's where people don't necessarily think enough about content, because again, like in theory, we should know our buyers even better. We should know their industry, their titles. We should know, hey, this is a customer that we've had for a year versus a customer that we've maybe had for 7 years, and they're going to need different things. So for us, we actually focus a lot on content once somebody is a customer. And again, for your viewers, whether they're B2B or B2C, they're thinking a lot about loyalty, retention, expansion. So it's pretty important.
And so what's specifically going on in the Learning Center?
Yeah, so for us, our number one objective for customers is, and this kind of came up earlier a bit, is to be the trusted advisor. I kind of like to think about Tealium and our Learning Center as it's your trusted friend that you'd study with for a final. It's like they're the person that you invite over. And so we really think a lot about, here's tips and tricks for, doing your job better. It might not all be related to technology. It could be, hey, you've mastered one use case. Here's 3 more that you can start to look at. It could be sharing success from another customer so they can see that. But our number one goal is to really make sure that we're making their jobs easier.
Got it. Okay. So when you think about your content program, and we've already talked about that, is there something else that you've done of late that you went, oh man, that really worked well?
Yes, I have something that I can share that I think worked really well, and something that I'll share that I didn't think worked well as in addition. So we came out with one of the things that we hear from a lot of people, especially in our industry, they're looking at customer data platforms, is where should I get started? What are use cases that I should be thinking about? And you talked about long form or pretty, detailed types of content. And we put out a definitive guide to CDPs. And what we really focused on there was less about the technology. It was more, here's the use cases. Here's some of the processes that you should think about. And the team, like what team should you have in place? So I agree with you there. I think having kind of these big rock pieces that then you can break down is great. But that was successful. And then we also put out, we called it the Joy of Data Cookbook. That was just all use cases, because again, that's what we get asked more often than not. Hey, we've done a retention use case, but how can we start on loyalty? So those 2 pieces worked really, really well for us. We got lots of engagement, and the best of all, and you'd appreciate this, we heard a lot from our sales team that their customers just loved it. So we look at that closely.
And I, when the salespeople say their customers love it, that's always a good sign, because it means they're going to share it, right? And this is one of the big underutilized things. If you create all this content and the salespeople don't share it, it's like the salesperson is presenting a different brand, because they're not using. And so if they're not feeling the love for the content, that's a problem. So you were going to share an example of something that didn't work as well.
Yes. So this I think was touched upon earlier, but I love to save people the pain if I can do it. So I think a lot of people, we think a lot about content, but we don't necessarily think a lot about the channels and doing a lot of testing with the channels. And I think it came up earlier where, we all get so much email. So we have had a customer newsletter for a while that we've put out, and I think the content is great. But the newsletter itself, when we looked at the data, the open rates, the click-through, it just it wasn't there. So that was an example where I think the core content was great, but the vehicle and how we delivered it was not optimized. And then we actually took the same content and we use a tool in our product called Pendo, so we can kind of deliver some of the same content in app, and that's been much more successful. So hopefully people really, when they think about content, it's not just what you're creating, it's the channel you're delivering it in.
Yeah, it's funny you bring up newsletters, because I love newsletters, but I think Microsoft in the inbox with the other has killed newsletters. It's just funny, because I used to read a lot more newsletters than I do, but they don't make it into the primary feed. And I'm also sort of thinking, I've been writing a newsletter since 2008, probably. And I know there's great value in it, but I do think we get more reads on it on our website than we do in the open, despite the size of the list. And so I thank you for pointing that out. It's like, you might just need to let go. And but I don't want to stop writing it.
Yeah, but it's interesting. You said early on it was great. So that's the other thing too, right? It changes. Like we do all get a lot of content, and I think for me several years ago, sure, I'd look at a newsletter, and there are a few that I still love. I'm not anti-newsletter, but just for us, when we tested it, it just was not effective for our customer base. So then you have to pivot fast.
Right. And if your customers aren't reading your newsletter, why bother?
Yeah, why bother?
Right. Why bother? Because if they're not going to read it, nobody's going to read it.
Yeah.
So either you have to then sort of start testing a whole new approach to the newsletter because the content wasn't quite right, or you just have to accept the fact that getting their attention in their inbox is not going to work. So you got to use the platform.
That's right. That's right.
Interesting. Well, and you're lucky enough to have a platform where you can reach your customers. A lot of folks don't. And so, the email is still hugely relied upon as a way of getting in the door with the content. And I wonder if you took that same content and you put it in social.
Oh, absolutely. You're right. I mean, but that's exactly, I think what's so great about what we're discussing today. It's like, you can take the same content and maybe it's like you said, put it on social, deliver it in a different way. And you could see and we did, it wasn't a content problem. It was just that I think our audience just gets a lot of emails. So it was just some people looked at it, but I don't think it was significant enough to warrant the effort. And I think you've talked about this on this show. It's like, as marketers, we can't go do everything. We have to have our best bets. So you have to be data driven and see what's working. And it's not personal. You just have to make a change.
So let me ask you this. One of the things that I really feel about, and this happens, is this peanut butter effect where you have 10 personas, you've got 10 different messages, you create this grid. And so suddenly you have one piece of content that tells one story to 1/100th of your target audience. And it's not additive. It doesn't come back to this larger story. And I feel like that is crushing content programs. And I'm just curious how you fight that and try to make sure that the content comes back to your main story and your main purpose.
Yeah, that's a good point. It's kind of like, if you're all things to all people, then you're not resonating really with anyone. And for me, I think it's kind of figuring out, just taking a really simple step back. What is the key objective that you're trying to figure out in your business? Is it acquisition? And then say it is, who's kind of that key persona that you're trying to reach? Eventually it may be a buying group, especially in B2B, but there's probably one or two personas that are really engaging early on, or middle stage or late stage. And what is it they need? And I really like to double down there, because as you said, you can get into these big content grids and little things for everyone. And at the end of the day, does that move the needle that much? If you really look at it, it often does not. And so I encourage people to be bold and take some big bets and do something that is really, really focused on what your goal is and hitting that person that's researching online. Like for your business, it may not be a CMO that's evaluating all these solutions online. It may be somebody different. So delight them and don't focus on everyone else.
Big bets and delight. Music to this renegade's ear. Yeah. Thank you for that. So let's bring back Suzanne, and let's everybody, Jamie, let's just, before we take a break here, one question for you is, in-house or outsource? Who wants to, Jamie, what is, if you did it on a percentage, what percentage is in-house versus outsource of content?
Well, the majority of what we do, given the nature of our business, the majority is in-house. But I was actually having this conversation with one of our creative directors, because I would suggest that it's not one or the other. I think that there's a lot of merit in having partners outside of your organization that can come in with fresh eyes and challenge your thinking. And just like we want to be strategic thought partners to our customers, is sometimes these outside agencies can be very good strategic thought partners to us as well. So for my business, and it's different from prior companies I've worked for, the majority of content is produced in-house, just given the nature of what we do and the makeup of our people. We're all creators. But for certain projects, we will go out to just infuse kind of our own thinking and challenge our own notions and ideas with other agencies that want to partner with us. So I don't have a breakdown of percentage, but I see the merit and value in having both at your fingertips to leverage depending upon the project.
Suzanne, Heidi, where are you in that mix?
Yeah.
Suzanne?
Oh, go ahead. Sorry.
Sorry. Go ahead,
Yeah,
Suzanne.
so we are the same. We do majority of ours in-house, but we do some collaboration and partnerships with others outside in the marketplace, whether it's an insight survey or whether it's actually another professional organization that we feel like there's some value in collaborating together. But majority of ours is in-house. Yeah.
Interesting. Heidi, same?
Yeah, we do our big rock pieces in-house. Like if we have a strong thought leadership perspective, we definitely want to do that in-house. But I would say we do a lot of outsourcing, especially internationally, where we need to have like a specific flavor or there's something that's really unique for a region. I think that works really well. And I think Suzanne and Jamie said it, like if you have a great partner and there's a great shared kind of perspective that you're trying to get out, that it's wonderful to work with outside people.
Yeah, it's interesting because this came up in huddles a couple of times as sort of this content fatigue and digital fatigue and response rates are going down. One of the ways to sort of up the game is to partner with a better known company that has some strong content, like The Economist or Fortune or other things like that. And we're going to talk about that. But first, I'd like to take a second and talk about and plug CMO Huddles. So, launched in 2020, CMO Huddles is an invitation-only subscription service that brings together an elite group of CMOs to share, care, and dare each other to greatness. One CMO described Huddles as timely conversations with smart peers and in a trusted environment, while another called it a cross between an expert workshop and a therapy session. If you're a B2B CMO that can share and care with the best of them, visit cmohuddles.com or send me an email to see if you qualify for a guest pass. So, let's see. Jamie, you guys have anything to add about CMO Huddles?
Love it. I think I love how you described it as kind of a therapy group at the same time. I love the fact that we can come together and share commonalities in things we're trying to solve, or even recommend and refer vendors. It's such a nice forum to be able to bond with other marketing leaders that are facing the same things that you are, and to just have thought partners on a variety of different topics. But I love the therapy session because we know our jobs are hard. So
they are hard. I got to say, you guys have just the hardest job around. Anyway, I don't want to cut off Suzanne or, if you have anything else to say, now's the moment.
Yeah.
I would just say that somebody else has solved your problem, right? So why you don't need to spend time like rehashing it. There's another CMO out there that's figured it out. And for me, it's great just because I feel like it saves you so much time. Like somebody else has solved that challenge.
I love that. I mean, that's
absolutely. Yeah. Don't reinvent the wheel. Just learn from your smarter partners that have already been there, done that. Yeah.
All right. Well, speaking of hardworking folks, you guys have already worked really hard. I happen to have some recorded comments while we go, and Jamie and Suzanne are going to grab their chill glasses and the gin. So we'll be right back after this video break.
If you're the CMO, you're sort of at the top of the marketing heap, and you need other folks to grow and develop and challenge and hear ideas. So to me, it's sharpening the saw.
Part of the service that you provide is that concierge service, and connect one-to-one when you know that there's something that one of us is concerned about or has questions about.
It's a great place to have a sounding board to say, hey, have you used this technology and how has it worked, or what are the things to think about when you deploy it?
Like, I have this problem. I know these 4 softwares or tools that fix it. Sort of diligence conversation that can happen in 15 minutes would have taken me hours otherwise.
Really appreciate the diversity of thought.
Value of this sort of getting to know people who are not necessarily in your daily orbit.
First of all, I learn something every single time. Can't make it. You do this incredible recap so that you can scan through with all these resources is huge. The Slack channel, you've got a question, you post it in the Slack channel, and then people can respond and send suggestions. It's really as ingrained or pervasive as you want it to be.
Jackie has constantly reminded me that we need a call to action on everything we do. So if you are a CMO that can share and care and dare with the best of them, visit CMOHuddles.com. How's that for a call to action, Jackie? Okay. All right. We're back. And we are going to be tasting 2 gins today. One is new to me. It's called Kenobi Kyoto Dry Gin. It's made in Japan. And the other is Drumshanbo Gunpowder Irish Gin, which we've had on the show before, but you folks haven't done it. And I know that a gin tasting is a weird thing because typically you would have it as a gin and tonic or so forth. So don't worry about it. But by the way, this is what Kenobi looks like. And it's a very cool bottle. So let's go ahead and taste. I'll start with the Kenobi. Man, that one just about explodes in your mouth. And then let's try the Gunpowder. So really all we're looking at are some of the differences that you taste or the sensation that you have. I mean, again, it's a weird thing to just taste gin plain, but I'm curious, what did you taste, if at all? What was the experience like and different for you, Suzanne?
Well, the Gunpowder definitely had a floral, a light floral, almost like a summer breeze. Yeah.
Nice. They'll love that back in Ireland. That's the meadow sweet, says so. And what do you think, and Jamie?
Same. I very much taste floral, and for full disclosure, I'm not a gin connoisseur. I live in wine country, but I taste a lot of floral. It's really nice. I actually really like this. They're both different.
They are really different. And I have to say, I cheated a little bit, and I made a Kenobi Martini on Friday night, and it was sensational. And one thing about this gin is it's not subtle. I mean, there's a lot going on in this gin, but it's not, and there's all sorts of ingredients we're going to talk about, the yuzu and hinoki and orris. But one of the funny things about both of these gins is they both have a tea in them. And the Drumshanbo has this, what's called gunpowder tea. And I'm trying to remember which one is what is the tea? It's a green tea in the Kenobi. And you can't really taste it, but it's there. I think in the Gunpowder, you can actually taste the gunpowder. It's that sort of flinty finish. Oh, right. Kenobi means the beauty of the seasons. By the way, this is the kind of gin that you buy for really special occasions. It's twice as expensive as any of the other gins that I would ever buy on a normal basis. But it's pretty special, I have to say. It's got this gingery thing going on. But we have a botanical expert standing by. So we're going to ask our botanical expert, Nicole. Hello, Nicole.
Hi, everyone. How are you?
We're good. We're enjoying this now. There's 2 ingredients that I had never heard from before. One is yuzu and one is hinoki. So what the heck are those?
Well, for both of them today, I'm taking you to Japan. So in one hand, we have yuzu, which is a Japanese citrus fruit that is very similar to grapefruit in the unevenness of the skin, and it can be yellow or green depending on the degree of ripeness. And then on the other hand, you have hinoki cypress, which is one of the most elegant types of wood in Japan. And this was used in ancient times in Japan as a construction material to build temples and shrines. And even if you're feeling a little stressed, you can also use that to relieve some stress. And a fun fact about yuzu is that the fresh yuzu is actually legally, like you can import it to the US. However, it is grown within the country but the supplies is very scarce, so it's very expensive to obtain it.
So there you have it. So yuzu, you're drinking it. You know, it's like you're because you couldn't actually eat it. All right, Nicole, thanks for joining us.
Bye, everyone.
And any other last comments about the gin? Thoughts? What you know, and takeaways?
I'm not a big gin person either, but I did like both of them. I could see myself drinking them.
Yeah, I would say, you know, as a martini, they're both killer. I used to think that the Gunpowder was my favorite by far, just because of the balance and the interestingness to it. I have to say Kenobi just sort of raised the bar again. So, but if you had to pick one, which one would you pick?
Oh, go ahead, Suzanne.
Gunpowder.
There's a Gunpowder.
Me too. I think because of the tasting, but I'm gonna look forward to mixing both of, well, not together.
Yes, yes. And if you do make a gin and tonic, we recommend on this show, get a high quality tonic, not this sort of just get a high quality tonic, and try with the Drumshanbo, try it with a grapefruit slice.
All right.
Unexpected. Okay. All right. Let's get back to the show. Let's get back to the show. Get Heidi back on. So, all right. So yeah. So there you have it, Heidi. I mean, I know it's early in the afternoon there.
Early, yeah.
Yeah. So, okay.
Now I wish I did it.
I know. So, one of the things that we started talking about is partnerships. And I know that, like, so Paul Stoddard, who was on the show 2 weeks ago from Epicor, mentioned that he was partnering with Ceros. And I thought that's kind of cool. And also you have a partnership with Litmus. So talk about those from a content standpoint and how those partnerships work for you.
Sure. We love Epicor and we love Litmus as well. For Epicor, they have been a partner of ours for a few years. So they use Ceros to create content for things like insight reports. So they've been able to leverage the studio to take complicated information and figure out how to do really good, compelling storytelling with data. They've also leveraged it for things like brand resources and brand guidelines and creating a really fun experience that they can share with their own partners and internally for doing, making sure that everyone's adhering to their guidelines. So they've leveraged Ceros for multiple use cases, if you will, for content. So there's a partnership, Drew, that is just partnering with companies to have access to a studio where they can go in and create. But we also have partnerships with companies like Pinterest. So if companies want to be able to create, say, experiences from post-click experiences, they can actually leverage our internal resources. As I mentioned before, we have designers and content strategists to specifically create post-click experiences for Pinterest. And then the other thing, and Suzanne and Heidi kind of spoke to this as well. So there's the channels that you have to activate that your content will feed. And so we understand the importance of distribution. So we also partner with different technology companies that marketers rely upon to actually get content out into the universe. And so there's different ways, but Heidi mentioned the importance of being a strategic advisor, and we take that to heart, even at Ceros. We want to make sure that not only do we enable marketers and designers to really create, but we're here also as a resource for them, as a thought partner, if you will.
Got it. Okay. And so Heidi, Suzanne, any partnerships that you've done of late that have been particularly effective to help you either reach a new audience or gets in front of a different segment or just produce content at a whole nother level?
Sure.
Heidi?
Yeah. I mean, Yeah, no, absolutely. I think the way like we think a lot about working with either analysts, that's been a great thing. If there's an area where you might need credibility, as an example, you talked about maybe, especially this last year, a lot of people were getting into maybe a new vertical. And so if you need credibility, say in a new vertical, maybe working with an analyst that could, kind of back up what you're saying, or even a partner that has a strength there, that's something that I see that we do quite a bit of. And I think it adds a lot of nice credibility. We also work with a lot of, for us, like more technology partners where it's, Tealium and maybe Braze together. This is what somebody's able to achieve. And I find like having a nice defined use case and describing that in content works really well. And then kind of like what Jamie's saying, I think that there's other partners that you can work with. We've even done work with our PR firm on, the state of a CDP report where they go out and do a survey for us. Then you can kind of use that, kind of piece of content, talk about it in the media, do a lot with it. So it's a really good strategy. And I think what we've all talked about since the beginning is how can you get more scale from what you're doing? Because most of us don't have teams of 20 content writers on staff. Sadly.
Yeah, I love the point about the research. We've been doing a lot of that kind of thing where you really do a well-crafted study that tells a story that's really interesting to a lot of your constituents, so you can get some PR. It's data that you can use in big forms and little forms. The salespeople can use it. So having proprietary research makes a lot of sense. And Suzanne, I want to go back to the partnership. Any partnership that you've done of late that was particularly successful?
As Heidi and Jamie both talked about, we do proprietary research. And so we, again, also use the media and PR kind of on that front end. But this past year, the media has really reached out to us to kind of use us as a sounding board for some of those facts and statistics, and to kind of help give them some grounding in some base data and information. And then we've used our expert partnerships and associations to kind of help them fill in some stories and insights that they were looking for. So that's been a great resource for us. It was our fourth year to do it. We're planning to do it again this year, and that's definitely been a big win for us.
Yeah, and I think that what you've just described there is so critical. If you get some data and a study that starts to resonate, if you do it 2 years or 3 years or 4 years in a row, then you are a source of information, and the credibility is there. And I do think that's, again, one of those things that people are, well, we did that last year, we can't do that again. No. It gets stronger with each year because you've benchmarked it. Okay, that's right. Very cool. I have to, of course, at this moment say, well, what would Ben Franklin say of all of this? And of course, Ben Franklin was a publisher. He was a big content guy. So he'd be all over it. And he was all over him, Poor Farmer's Almanac, Poor Richard's Almanac was incredible content that he had tremendous fun with creating. But the irony of all that is the quote I'm going to pull out from him is, and one that I've sort of really taken to heart, is, well done is better than well said. And the point of this is ultimately we marketers do stuff. Now we have to do it well, but we have to do a lot of stuff. And I think the content that we've been talking about is very much about doing stuff that is helpful to somebody in their world. Okay. So now let's talk about metrics. We've created all this content. We've got all these partners. We've figured out the right channels. How are we measuring this stuff? And we'll start with Suzanne. And one of the things I'm just going to make an editorial comment on is, for example, and I want to hear your opinion, gates or no gates? Who has gates?
We have some
Anybody?
gates.
Some. Who's that? That was you.
Heidi,
have some gates.
Heidi,
you have some gates.
Some, but I think selectively. Because in general,
okay.
The question I always ask internally is like, would you fill out a form? And most people are like, no, I wouldn't, of course.
Right.
So I think it's something we're probably moving more away from, but I'm just being honest. We do have a few.
I know. It's very hard when you've had gates, because the first question is, well, where are you going to get the names from? Well, there's a ton of places to get the names these days. So anyway, Suzanne, gates?
No gates.
No gates?
No gates.
Okay. And how about you, Jamie?
Rarely.
Okay.
Yes.
All right. So no gates, because we can capture leads other ways. And if, my feeling is you can have a gate if the content that you're putting up was worth paying for. Like if it's so good that it's worth paying for, then put a gate up. But if it isn't, what are you doing? What are you really doing here? You're just wasting someone's time. Okay, so let's talk about okay, it depends on the gate. All right.
Something just like a name, and then you get it, and that's easy.
Yeah, but still, you know what every time you fill out a gate, you know what it means. You're going to get a call from a salesperson, and it's annoying. If I want to talk to a salesperson, I'll be ready to talk to a salesperson when I'm ready to buy it, when I'm ready to think about it. Anyway, we're going back to metrics. What do you see? And Heidi, I know we're light gates, but still, what metrics matter to you in what do you really look at in all of this?
Yeah, so for us, I kind of look at it across a period of time. So maybe you put out a great piece of content and it's week one. I like to look at downloads, and are we getting downloads from people that are in accounts that we care about that fit our ideal customer profile? As an example, if my mom downloads it, that we don't care. So that's the first piece of what I look at. Yeah, sorry, Mom. But then we basically have everything set up so I can then over time, which it does take time, start to look at, are we getting meetings? Do we see pipeline? Can I associate that this is part of, are we seeing it in deals? And there's a lot of ways that you can set up, and that's for another time. But we try to be very metrics driven because, as you know, it's people, it's dollars, it's time. And so you have to measure it.
Yeah. And as I'm listening to you, I'm also thinking about all the other things that in this world of 27 touches, I mean, we're talking about this impossible form of attribution modeling. And, now maybe you've nailed it, but so you could be measuring the wrong thing, right? I mean, it could be downloads and you could be looking at volume of downloads, but it turns out that there's one piece of content that's only downloaded 10 times, but that's the deal closer.
But that's right. That's right. Because in my past, I've seen it where there was a piece of content at a company I used to be at, and it was our top downloaded piece, but it was not the thing that moved the needle. It was great for engaging an audience, but it wasn't necessarily our buyer. And that's why I think it is important to look at all of the kind of, are you getting engagement, meetings, and then are you ultimately seeing it in your close one deals? And I think, again, we all know I'll be honest, none of this is a perfect science, but you can compare it to other pieces of content. So you can say, look, like, hey, we did see a little bit more on this one versus this other one. And so that gives you a sense of it. It's directional.
Right. Okay. Right. We're not going to overrun. What about you, Suzanne? What about metrics that matter?
Very similar. We do have an attribution model we've built internally that we use. But a lot of ours is exactly what Heidi was talking about. It's really just looking at it. And at the end of the day, it's what is converting to an engagement, an appointment, an actual pipeline opportunity. And, content that's getting absolutely no visits at all, then we'll revisit that, and say, what's the point? And things that are getting an awful lot of engagement, but we aren't seeing any kind of pull through, we'll revisit that. And maybe that's our evergreen content that's just great for building that brand reputation, but really is not one of our funnel drivers, if you will. And so we definitely, same thing. We also have put in some lead scoring that for more of our technology type things, they have a very definitive path. But every group's a little different, again, depending on their service, their solution, and their business development team that's going to grab it. But definitely at the end of the day, it's not a fine science, it's an art and a science. But we've got consistent metrics we're looking at over time to see if we're moving anything forward.
Interesting. And as you're talking, I'm also thinking about a couple of things I've heard I can't remember whether it was a podcast or this show, but one of the things that, websites start to get really heavy and you start to add hundreds of pieces of content every year. And I think it was one CMO who said they went from something like 90,000 pieces to 10,000 pieces, and their website, besides just being lighter, started performing so much better with Google. I thought that was fascinating. So more content does not necessarily mean better. That was part one of this thought. And then the second thought is we can manipulate this a little bit. So we have a piece of content and we put media behind it, right? And then suddenly that content gets more support. It might get more Google juice. Suddenly that does. So I kind of feel like some of this is you can control the levers here. Am I making that up? I mean, because we can't be counting on all of this stuff to be organic, right?
Right.
Right.
Okay. So we're placing some bets on some of this content, and we're supporting it, and we're pushing it out, if you will, whether it's, through social channels or just through Google. We're supporting it, and that will change the ballgame. So, yes. So Jared, one of our listeners, said art and science. Yes, no doubt with content. It is about, thank you for that. It is about art and science. There are those who would like to believe it is all science, but we know better.
Drew, I'd like to just comment on that real quickly, though, too, because I feel fortunate as a modern marketer that we have now access to data that can tell us, excuse me, even in flight, how well things are performing, so we can course correct. My fear is that because the data can be imperfect in really tracking buyer behavior, that we're going to make the wrong decisions, or we're going to come to the wrong conclusions because of the imperfect nature of data and these tools that are, designed to track and measure. And so we have to be careful of not over relying on that, since it doesn't perfectly track human behavior of how they see things. So, for example, we may have a number of listeners today and they may end up showing up at Heidi's website. They're going to be interested, or Suzanne's. And you know what? Guess what? They came through here. Right. So we have to be careful of over relying on some of the information. It's good, but also our own intuition. We have to remember that we come with our own intuition and experience that may tell us that, yes, a podcast is going to help. It's hard to measure. Yeah. So we need to make sure that as we go this, we swing this direction of data, and performance, that it doesn't stifle our ability to do just the right thing and understand human behavior of how they consume information and where they consume it.
Amen to that. And I have to say, I want to just add a little coda to it, which is you could make a mistake if you optimize content based on sort of, let's just say, readership and promote that content with a very specialized message. You may be off brand, but that one could win, right? Because it might draw, it's like clickbait. You can get people to come to the website, but then they might leave. So I think that this is where having a big brand story and thinking about that in the context of all your content is so helpful, because at least every piece of content will be on brand and will be on sort of message. And then you can sort of optimize within it. All right, we're getting close to time here. I want to ask Heidi some final words of wisdom for some CMOs who might be just new on the job and the content engine hasn't been built out. What's your advice?
Yeah, my advice would be three things. It would be hone in on the top goal that you have, because again, it's like you can't boil the ocean. So you'll get there, but figure out, is content most critical for you? Do you need it for retention, acquisition? Define that. Make sure that you know the key people that you are sending that content to, or make sure you really get those personas and know what channels they engage with you on. We talked about this earlier. Like, if your audience is big on social, a 50-page ebook's maybe not the answer. So really understanding how they consume that content is a critical one. And then I think really, come up with a big rock piece of content that has your thought leadership that you can then break up. And again, it's a big, great piece. It's kind of like your, stake and your philosophy, but then have the ability to then distribute that in different ways and create videos from it, all the things that we all know. Taco Bell marketing strategy. I love it. So that's what I'd recommend, but don't boil the ocean, because you can't and you'll go crazy.
I love it. Okay. Suzanne, one thought. One last thought.
One last thought. I loved your comment, and I'll reiterate it. Your brand, your content strategy's got to be authentic with your brand.
Love it. Okay. And Jamie, one last thought.
Content is a way for us to tell stories. So make sure that you have a solid story that's relevant to your buyers. Content is simply chapters within that. So make sure you got the right story nailed down too.
I love it. Okay, well, thank you, Jamie, Suzanne, Heidi. You're all great sports. Thank you, audience, for staying with us. Please join us in 2 weeks when we'll be talking about my new book and have the authors of CMO to CRO, that's Brandy Starr and Rolly Keenan, along with CMO Peter Finter to keep them honest. Cue the music. Renegade Thinkers Live is produced by Melissa Caffrey. Our intern is Alex Smith. Our botanical expert is Nicole Hernandez. For show notes and past episodes, please visit renegade.com, home of quite possibly the savviest B2B marketing boutique in New York City. I'm your host, Drew Neiser, and until next time, keep those renegade thinking caps on and strong.